My husband died keeping a secret for years, and I found $2.5 million that changed my life forever. But before I got to those millions, I had to go through a hell I never imagined existed within my own family. Today, I'm going to tell you something I never thought I'd tell. And if you for a second feel like this sounds familiar, I just ask that you leave a like and subscribe. It will help me to keep unburdening myself. My name is Carol Thompson. I'm 68 years old, and I live in a 2-story house in the Chicago suburb of Oak Park. That morning of March 15th, as I was preparing coffee in the percolator, grinding the beans by hand just as I had for 40 years, my daughter-in-law, Jessica, walked in talking on the phone with one of her friends from work. Her voice echoed through the house with that arrogance I had learned to recognize. "No, honey, you can't imagine the situation," she said as she poured herself some juice from the refrigerator without even a glance at me. The woman still grinds her coffee by hand, as if we were living on a prairie farm in the 50s. I've already told Robert we need an espresso machine, but she insists on her Stone Age methods. My hands stopped over the wooden spoon. The aroma of the coffee was now mixed with the bitter taste of humiliation. Jessica kept talking, completely ignoring my presence, as if I were part of the furniture, an old relic that had to be tolerated. "Of course, girl, you know how these old ladies are. They cling to their habits because they don't understand the modern world. Yesterday she wanted to teach me how to bake bread from scratch. Bread from scratch. When you can buy a perfect sourdough loaf at Costco and have it ready in 3 minutes. Every word was like a slap in the face. I, who had taught that woman how to roast a perfect Thanksgiving turkey when she first married my son, Robert. I, who had given her my wedding pearls to wear at her ceremony. I, who had looked after her children when she went on trips with her friends to Las Vegas, leaving me notes with instructions as if I were a hired housekeeper. The sound of the front door opening pulled me from my thoughts. Robert was home from work. His tie loosened, and that tired expression he'd adopted ever since Jessica started pressuring him to convince me to update the house. My son, 42 years old, a successful engineer, the pride of my life, now avoided my gaze whenever his wife started with her comments. "Hi, Mom." He greeted me with a kiss on the cheek, but the gesture was mechanical, distant. "Honey." Jessica clung to his arm. "Tell your mom what we talked about last night about the kitchen remodel." "I've already found the perfect architect." Robert sighed. I knew that sigh. It was the same one he made as a child when he knew he had to tell me something that would hurt me. "Mom, we've been thinking it might be a good idea to modernize things a bit. You know, the house needs some changes, and Jessica has great taste for changes?" I interrupted, feeling my voice tremble. "What kind of changes?" Jessica smiled with that sweet and venomous expression she had perfected. "Nothing drastic, Mom-in-law. It's just that this kitchen is very vintage. We were thinking of removing that old gas stove, replacing the hand-painted southwestern tiles with something more minimalist, and obviously updating the entire electrical system. My decorator says that with a budget of $75,000, it would look incredible. $75,000. To destroy the kitchen that Edward, my late husband, had designed especially for me. The tiles we had chosen together on a trip to Santa Fe during our honeymoon. The stove where I had cooked Robert's favorite meals throughout his childhood. "This kitchen," I said, touching the granite countertop that Edward had installed with his own hands. "Your father and I built it. Every detail holds a memory." "Oh, Carol." Jessica rolled her eyes. "Memories are in the heart, not in the furniture. Besides, think about the grandkids. When Ethan and Madison come over, they're going to want a modern kitchen, with technology, not a museum." The mention of my grandchildren hurt more than anything else. Ethan, 15, and Madison, 12, hardly ever came to visit me. When they did, they were glued to their phones, answering with monosyllables to my questions about school, about their friends, about their dreams. Jessica had raised them to see my house as boring, old-fashioned, irrelevant. Robert cleared his throat. "Mom, we've also been thinking that maybe it would be good for you to have your own space. More private, more comfortable for you." The air grew thick. I understood perfectly what he was suggesting. My own space? "Well," Jessica intervened, "there are some really nice assisted living facilities up in Lake Forest. With nurses, activities, people your age, you wouldn't have to worry about maintaining this big house anymore. My world collapsed. They wanted to kick me out of my home, out of the house where I had raised Robert, where I had cared for Edward during his illness, where every wall held 40 years of my life. They wanted to send me to a facility to take my house, turn it into their personal project, and erase my existence as if I had never mattered. "This is my house," I whispered. "Yes, but, Mom?" Robert avoided my eyes. "You've said yourself that it's a lot of work to maintain, and we could help you better if I get out of here." I finished the sentence. Jessica sighed dramatically. "No one said, 'Get out,' Carol. We're just thinking about your well-being. At your age, you shouldn't be burdened with so many responsibilities." That night, when they went to their bedroom, I was left alone in the living room, surrounded by family photographs that no one else seemed to value anymore. The photo of my wedding with Edward, where we smiled in front of the Buckingham Fountain. Robert's engineering graduation photo, his eyes shining with happiness. Pictures of my grandchildren when they were little, when they would still run to me shouting, "Grandma Carol," when they came to visit. I picked up Edward's picture and hugged it to my chest. He had died 3 years ago from a sudden heart attack, and since then my world had become smaller, quieter, more lonely. The house that was once filled with laughter and conversations now only echoed with the whispers of those planning my disappearance. "Edward," I spoke to the photograph, "I don't know what to do. They're taking everything that was ours. They're erasing me from my own life." And at that moment, as if the universe had heard my desperate plea, something caught my eye. Behind the picture frame, there was a small, yellowed envelope I had never seen before. With trembling hands, I opened the envelope I had found behind Edward's photograph. Inside was a note written in his distinctive handwriting, that elegant script I always admired. "My love, if you are reading this, it means I am no longer with you. In the secret drawer of my desk, you will find something that changed our lives. I love you forever. Edward." My heart was beating so loudly I thought I would wake the whole house. A secret drawer? Edward had owned that mahogany desk in his study for over 20 years, and he never mentioned any hidden compartment. I walked to the study with silent steps, avoiding the floorboard that creaked near the stairs. The study still held the scent of the cigars Edward smoked on Sundays, and the smell of leather from his engineering books. Jessica had insisted several times on turning the space into a modern home office, but Robert had managed to keep it intact. For now, I examined every inch of the desk until, by pressing a small side molding, I heard a soft click. A hidden drawer slid open, revealing documents, keys, and a longer letter dated 5 years ago. "Carol, my entire life. For 40 years, we built our home with love and sacrifice. But there's something I never told you because I wanted to protect you. At 247 Wacker Drive, under the name EDC Family Investments, we have properties and investments worth over $2.5 million. Everything is in your name as well. I used some of the inheritance from my father, which I never mentioned, and made it grow in silence. I wanted you to be free if something happened to me. The bank keys are in this envelope. I love you, Edward." My legs grew weak. $2.5 million? Edward had always been very private about money, managing our finances with discretion, but we lived a simple life. I never imagined he was hiding such a secret. A secret I now understood he had kept out of love, to protect me from any eventuality. But as I processed this extraordinary revelation, memories of everything I had sacrificed for my family began to bombard my mind like a painful film. I remembered when Robert was 16 and wanted to attend a very expensive private university for engineering. Edward and I worked double shifts to pay the tuition. I sold homemade pies to the secretaries at the office where I worked as a receptionist, getting up at 4 in the morning to bake. My hands always smelled of flour and cinnamon. My feet swelled from standing so much. But every dollar I earned went directly to my son's education. When Robert graduated from engineering, he didn't even mention our sacrifice in his speech. He talked about overcoming obstacles and working hard. But he never said that his parents had worked themselves to the bone to give him those opportunities. Then came the wedding with Jessica, an extravagant ceremony at the Chicago Botanic Garden that cost over $50,000. Edward and I emptied our savings and even took out a loan so Robert could have the wedding of his dreams, according to Jessica's demands. I remember her mother commenting aloud during the reception, "It's a good thing Robert has a prosperous future, because his family is very humble. As if being honest, hardworking people was something to be ashamed of. When my grandchildren were born, I became the unofficial nanny. Jessica went back to work immediately after giving birth, and I cared for Ethan and then Madison during their early years. I changed diapers, prepared bottles, walked through the night with feverish babies. My knees deteriorated from carrying children. My back was strained from sleeping in chairs because the little ones didn't want to sleep alone. "Oh, Carol," Jessica would say when she arrived in the afternoons. "It's so good that you're here. Daycare is so expensive, and it can't compare to a grandmother's love they shamelessly exploited." When Ethan turned 12, he wanted to join a travel soccer team at an exclusive club in Winnetka. The monthly cost was $500. Robert called me one afternoon with a worried voice. "Mom, you know we want the best for Ethan, but these expenses? Could you help us out? It's temporary until things get better for me at work." Of course, I said yes. I took money from my retirement savings and paid for the team for 2 years. Ethan never thanked me directly. In fact, when other kids asked who paid for his fees, he said his parents had made a special effort. Last year, when Edward died, I was emotionally shattered. Besides the pain of losing the love of my life, I had to face all the funeral expenses, the legal paperwork, and organizing the house. Robert and Jessica appeared sporadically, always in a hurry, always with excuses about work. "Mom, you know we want to spend more time with you, but Jessica has a big project at her agency, and I'm under a lot of pressure at the construction firm," Robert would explain while quickly signing papers. "But count on us for whatever you need." Counting on them turned out to be a cruel illusion. When I got the flu in December with a 102-degree fever, I called Robert for help. "Oh, Mom, tonight is Jessica's company holiday party. Can't you call Mrs. Gable from next door? I'm sure she can help you with some medicine." Mrs. Gable, my 75-year-old neighbor, was the one who took me to the doctor and stayed with me all night, making sure I took my medicine. My son was drinking eggnog while I was fighting a fever. In January, when they returned from their vacation in Key West, a 2-week all-inclusive resort trip, they came back tan and relaxed. Jessica was showing off pictures on Instagram while I had spent the holidays completely alone, eating leftovers and watching old movies on TV. "How was your New Year's, Carol?" Jessica asked me while checking her phone. "Lonely," I answered honestly. "Oh, but relax. We're here now. Besides, at your age, you shouldn't be staying up late with parties and all that." At my age. Always at my age. As if turning 68 had automatically made me an invisible person, without desires, without emotional needs, without the right to feel loved and valued. Last month, when my refrigerator broke down, I called Robert for advice. "Look, Mom, we don't have the cash for a new fridge right now. You have your savings, don't you? Besides, you can use this opportunity to buy a more modern, efficient one. Think of it as an investment. My savings. Always my savings for everything they didn't want to cover." But when Jessica wanted to trade in her car for a brand new BMW SUV, suddenly they had financing available. And now, tonight, I discovered that Edward had saved $2.5 million to secure my future. $2.5 million that they didn't know existed. $2.5 million that represented decades of my husband's silent work to protect me. As I held the bank documents in my hands, a mix of emotions washed over me. Gratitude towards Edward for his foresight. Pain for all the years of unrecognized sacrifices. But above all, a growing anger as I realized I had allowed them to treat me like a financial burden when, in reality, I had the resources to live with dignity. I put everything back in the secret drawer and returned to my room. But I couldn't sleep that night. For the first time in years, I had the power to change my situation. The question was, would I have the courage to use it? The next few days passed in a strange haze. I knew the biggest secret of my life, but I had to act as if nothing had changed. Every dismissive comment from Jessica, every indifferent gesture from Robert, every moment they treated me like an obstacle, now resonated differently in my mind. It was as if I had woken from a deep sleep and could finally see reality with clarity. On Friday morning, while I was making chili and eggs for breakfast, one of the few traditions Jessica hadn't managed to eliminate because Robert loved it, I heard voices in the living room. Jessica was on the phone with someone, and her tone was that conspiratorial whisper she used when she was plotting something. "Yes, honey. I've already spoken with the architect. He says he can start the demolition next week if we can get her to sign the papers. Robert is already working on convincing her. No, it won't be a problem. At her age, she doesn't really understand contracts, and we're practically her legal guardians." My hands froze over the skillet. Demolition? Papers? Legal guardians? Exactly, girl. Once we sign the remodeling authorization, we can technically do whatever we want with the property. And if she doesn't agree, well, you know, nursing homes exist for a reason. I felt as if a knife had been plunged into my stomach. Not only did they want to throw me out of my house, but they were planning to manipulate me legally to do it. They wanted me to sign documents that would strip me of control over my own property. That afternoon, Robert came home early from work with an expression that tried to be casual, but I knew my son. It was the same face he made as a child when he had broken something valuable. "Mom, can we talk?" Jessica prepared some papers to get everything in order with the house. "What kind of papers?" I asked, feigning innocence. Jessica appeared with a beige folder and that fake smile that now made me nauseous. "They're just formalities, Carol. Since Robert and I live here and help with the expenses, we need you to officially authorize us to make some decisions about maintenance and improvements. It's for legal protection, you understand?" I opened the folder and saw documents filled with complicated legal terms. But something caught my eye. In small print, it mentioned transfer of administrative rights and authorization for permanent structural modifications. "Does this mean you could make decisions about the house without consulting me?" Robert sighed with impatience. "Mom, don't overcomplicate it. It's just to make things easier. This way, you don't have to worry about complicated administrative stuff. But this is my house, Robert. The house your father and I bought, that we paid off over 20 years. Jessica laughed with that condescending chuckle that I now found unbearable. "Oh, Carol, nobody is questioning that it's your house. We just want to help you manage it better. At your age, these responsibilities can be very stressful. Again, at your age. As if being 68 had automatically made me incapable of managing my own life. I need time to read these documents carefully," I said, closing the folder. Robert frowned. "Mom, the lawyer told us we had to have them signed and returned by Monday. It's just a formality. If it's just a formality, then it can wait a few more days." Jessica exchanged a look with Robert. It was one of those looks heavy with meaning that couples develop after years of marriage. A look that clearly said, "Your mother is getting in the way of our plan." That night, after they shut themselves in their room, I heard their voices through the wall. They spoke in low tones, but the walls of this old house didn't keep secrets as well as they thought. "I told you your mom was going to be difficult," Jessica whispered with irritation. "We should have done this months ago, when she was still more confused after your dad's death." "Give me time, Jessica. I'll convince her." "Time?" "Robert, the architect has already booked dates for us, and I already promised my friends we'd have the house ready for the agency's annual party here in June. Can you imagine the embarrassment if I have to cancel because your mom won't cooperate?" "Fine. I'll talk to her more seriously tomorrow." "No, Robert. Tomorrow I will talk to her. You're too soft. Sometimes you have to be more direct with older people." My heart raced. What did more direct mean? On Saturday morning, I found out exactly what Jessica had in mind. She came into the kitchen while I was having breakfast, poured herself a coffee, and sat across from me with the demeanor of someone delivering an ultimatum. "Carol, we need to talk like adults." "I'm listening," I replied, keeping my voice calm. "Robert is very sentimental, but I'm more practical. This situation can't continue. You can't maintain this house alone anymore, and we can't keep carrying all the expenses without having legal authority over the important decisions." "Carrying all the expenses?" I asked, genuinely confused. "I pay for the electricity, the gas, the water, the food." Jessica waved her hand dismissively. "Oh, Carol, those are basic expenses. But the real maintenance, the major repairs, the property taxes, the homeowner's insurance, We handle all of that. And frankly, it's not fair for us to carry those responsibilities without having a say in the decisions. That was a lie. I had continued to pay the property taxes and insurance since Edward died. I had also paid when the water pump broke last year, and when a leak in the roof had to be repaired during the rainy season. Besides, Jessica continued, let's be honest. You're not at an age to live alone in such a large house. What happens if you fall down the stairs? If you have a medical emergency at night? Robert and I can't be watching you 24/7. No one has asked you to watch me, I retorted. No, but we're family. We have a moral responsibility. And that's why we've been researching options to make you safer and more comfortable. She pulled some brochures from her bag. They were all for assisted living facilities. Some looked nice in the photos, with gardens and spacious rooms. Others looked more like hospitals with cheerful decor. Look, there are options for every budget. This one here is very close, in the River North neighborhood. It has 24-hour nurses, recreational activities, balanced meals. And the best part is, you wouldn't have to worry about a thing. It's all inclusive. And how much does it cost? Well, it varies depending on the level of care. But Robert and I already calculated that with the sale of this house, there would be enough money to cover a very nice facility for many years. There it was, the sale of my house. That was their true intention all along. This house is not for sale, Jessica. Her expression changed. The mask of family concern cracked, and I saw something colder underneath. Carol, we don't want to resort to extremes, but if you can't properly care for yourself, there are legal procedures. Robert could file for guardianship due to incapacity. It's very easy to prove when an elderly person is living alone in inadequate conditions. The threat was crystal clear. If I didn't cooperate voluntarily, they would try to have me declared mentally incompetent to take legal control of my assets. Inadequate conditions? I asked, looking around my immaculate kitchen. A woman your age living alone in a 2-story house, without regular medical supervision, cooking on an old gas stove that could cause an accident. Any judge would understand the family's concerns. Jessica stood up and left the brochures on the table. Think about it, Carol. We can do this the easy way, with love and respect. Or we can do it the hard way, with lawyers and legal proceedings that will be very painful for everyone. You decide. When she left, I was alone with the brochures scattered on the table. My own ceiling seemed lower, the walls closer. For the first time in my life, I felt like a prisoner in my own home. That afternoon, as I walked through the garden Edward had planted with so much love, I made the hardest decision of my life. It was time to stop being a victim. It was time to use the gift Edward had left me. But first, I needed to know exactly what I was holding. On Monday morning, I woke up earlier than usual. At 6 a.m., I was already dressed in my best navy blue tailored suit, the one I had worn to Robert's graduation. I did my makeup carefully, styled my hair back in an elegant bun, and put on the pearl earrings Edward had given me for our 20th wedding anniversary. If I was going to face the truth about my inheritance, I would do it with the dignity I deserved. I took a cab to Wacker Drive. The building at number 247 was a modern, imposing glass tower, the kind of place where important people handle important money. My heart pounded as the elevator ascended to the 15th floor, where the offices of EDC Family Investments were located. The receptionist, a young, professional woman, smiled at me when I handed her the documents Edward had saved. Mrs. Thompson, it's so nice to finally meet you. Mr. Davies is expecting you. He asked me to see you immediately upon your arrival. He was expecting me? How did they know I would come? Mr. Davies was a man in his 50s, with graying hair and a warm smile that immediately put me at ease. His office was filled with diplomas, certifications, and a photograph of him shaking hands with a former president. Mrs. Thompson, first and foremost, please allow me to offer my deepest condolences for Mr. Thompson's passing. He was an extraordinary man and a very intelligent investor. Thank you, Mr. Davies. But I must confess, I'm completely confused. I've just discovered my husband had investments here, and I don't understand any of this. The lawyer smiled sympathetically. Mr. Thompson specifically asked that if anything happened to him, I make sure to explain everything to you personally. He knew you weren't aware of the details of his investments. He opened a thick folder with my name on the label. Mrs. Thompson, for the last 15 years, your husband systematically invested in real estate, stocks, government bonds, and some private businesses. He started with the inheritance from his father, which amounted to about $100,000, and he grew it extraordinarily. He showed me account statements, charts, documents that my mind could barely process. Currently, your total net worth is $2,550,000. This includes 3 apartments in the Gold Coast that are rented out, 2 commercial properties in River North, a very diversified stock portfolio, and approximately $200,000 in cash distributed across different banks. $2,550,000. The figure was so astronomical I couldn't comprehend it. It was more money than I had seen in my entire life, more than I had ever dreamed existed in the real world. And all of this is mine? All of it, ma'am. Mr. Thompson was very clear in his instructions. He wanted you to have complete financial freedom. In fact, the monthly income from your properties and investments is approximately $10,000 each month. $10,000 a month. While I was worrying about the cost of repairing my refrigerator, I had a monthly income that was more than twice Robert's salary. Mr. Davies, do you think he knew something like this might happen? That I would need this money to protect myself? The lawyer looked at me with a fatherly expression. Mrs. Thompson, your husband spoke of you often. He said you were the strongest woman he knew, but that you had spent your whole life taking care of others without taking care of yourself. He was worried that when he was gone, people might try to take advantage of your generosity. Tears began to roll down my cheeks. Edward had known. He had foreseen exactly what was happening now with Robert and Jessica. He asked me to give you this when you came. The lawyer handed me a sealed envelope with my name on it. Inside was another letter from Edward, this one much more personal. My eternal love. If you are reading this in Mr. Davies's office, it means someone is trying to hurt you or take what is yours. I know your noble heart, and I know you have always put family above yourself. But now it is time for you to put yourself first. This money is not for you to give away or to buy anyone's love. It is for you to live with the dignity you have always deserved. Do not let anyone make you feel guilty for protecting what is yours. I love you, Edward. I returned home in a state of emotional shock. I had the financial power to change my life completely, to protect myself from any threat, to live my final years with peace and dignity. But I also felt a mix of sadness and anger. Sadness for having lived the last few years feeling like a financial burden when in reality, I was a woman of means. Anger for having allowed them to treat me as if I were a destitute person, dependent on their family charity. When I got home, Robert and Jessica were in the living room waiting for me. Their faces showed impatience and a certain irritation. Mom, where have you been? Jessica prepared the corrected papers for you to sign today. The lawyer is waiting. What papers? I asked, feigning confusion. Jessica sighed dramatically. The authorization papers we explained yesterday, Carol. So we can manage the house properly. Ah, yes. The papers so you can sell my house and send me to a nursing home. Robert turned pale. Mom, nobody said anything about selling the house. Didn't they? Because yesterday Jessica explained to me very clearly that with the sale of this property, there would be enough money to pay for a very nice facility for many years. Jessica looked at me with the expression she used when caught in a lie. Carol, I think you misunderstood my words. We were just exploring options for your future well-being. My future well-being, I repeated slowly. And have you calculated how much money I need for that future well-being? Robert cleared his throat nervously. Well, Mom, we haven't done exact calculations, but we know that after Dad's death, your income isn't enough to maintain such a large house. My income isn't enough? I interrupted. For the first time in my life, I decided to speak with the authority my actual resources gave me. Robert, Jessica, I think it's time we had a completely honest conversation about money. Jessica frowned. I don't know what you mean, Carol. I mean that you have been planning my life based on the assumption that I am an elderly woman with no resources, dependent on your charity. Is that correct? Robert shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Mom, it's not charity. We're family. We want to take care of you. Take care of me? By having me declared mentally incompetent if I don't cooperate with your plans? A tense silence filled the room. Jessica looked at me with surprise, as if she didn't expect me to have understood her threats so clearly. Carol, I think you're exaggerating. I'm not exaggerating anything, Jessica. Yesterday you threatened me with legal proceedings if I didn't sign those papers. You told me that any judge would understand the family's concerns about a woman my age living alone. Robert stood up. Mom, I think you're misinterpreting Jessica's intentions. Misinterpreting? My voice began to rise. Robert, your wife told me verbatim that we could do this the easy way or the hard way, with lawyers and very painful legal proceedings. Did I misinterpret that too? Jessica exchanged a nervous glance with Robert. They clearly didn't expect me to remember their exact words or to confront them so directly. Besides, I continued, feeling a new strength coursing through my veins, I'm very curious to know exactly how much money you think I need to live with dignity. Well, Robert stammered, I suppose about $1,000 a month? $1,500 to be comfortable? $1,500 a month? I repeated. And how much do you think this house is worth? Jessica sat up straight, clearly more comfortable talking about concrete numbers. According to the appraisal we requested, the house could sell for about $800,000. It's a very well-located property. $800,000, I murmured. And with that, according to you, there would be enough money to keep me in a facility for many years. Exactly. Jessica smiled, thinking I was finally seeing reason. It could even cover a luxury facility. I remained silent for a long moment, letting the tension build in the room. Robert and Jessica looked at me expectantly, probably thinking I was seriously considering their proposal. Finally, I smiled. It was the first genuine smile I'd had in months. Robert, Jessica, there's something you need to know about my real financial situation. My financial situation, I continued, savoring every word, is that I am the owner of a net worth of $2.5 million, with a monthly income of $10,000 that comes from rental properties and investments that Edward managed for 15 years without my knowledge. The silence that followed was deafening. Robert's jaw literally dropped. Jessica blinked several times, as if trying to process a foreign language. What? What did you say? Robert whispered. $2.5 million, son. Your father, the man you thought had left his widow in poverty, secured me a fortune that is triple the value of this house you're so eager to sell. Jessica stood up abruptly, her face shifting from confusion to disbelief, and then to something I can only describe as pure greed. $2.5 million? And where is that money? Why did you never tell us? The change in her tone was instantaneous. She was no longer the condescending daughter-in-law worried about my well-being. Now she was a woman calculating numbers in her head. I never told you because until yesterday I didn't know either, Jessica. Edward kept this secret to protect me from exactly what is happening right now. Robert approached me with an expression that tried to be affectionate, but which I could now read perfectly. It was the same expression he used as a teenager when he wanted money for something special. Mom, this is incredible. Dad was always so smart with money, but now I understand why he was so calm about your future. With that amount, you could live like a queen. Like a queen? I repeated. In a nursing home? Jessica laughed nervously. Oh, Carol, forget about those facilities. With that kind of money, you could completely remodel this house, hire staff, live super comfortably right here. How convenient. Now that they knew I had money, the house was suddenly no longer too big for me, and I no longer needed constant medical supervision. What's more, Robert said enthusiastically, we could form a family partnership. I could manage the investments professionally. With my experience in construction, I could grow that portfolio considerably. And I could help you with the day-to-day administration, Jessica added quickly. I handle the accounting for the ad agency, so I understand perfectly how to manage large cash flows. There they were again. The vultures who, 5 minutes earlier, wanted to have me declared mentally incompetent were now generously offering to help me manage my fortune. A family partnership? I asked with feigned curiosity. And how would that work? Robert sat next to me, taking my hands with that false tenderness that now nauseated me. Look, Mom, you could continue to live here comfortably, without any worries. We would handle all the investment decisions, the payments, the renovations. You would just have to sign some papers and enjoy your money. Just sign papers, I repeated slowly. Exactly. Nothing complicated. And obviously, since we're family, everything would stay in the family when the time comes. When I died. That's what he didn't dare say directly. Jessica came around to my other side. Carol, think about it. With our help, that money could grow so much more. Robert has excellent contacts in real estate, and I know of investment opportunities in the advertising sector that could be very lucrative. And what would you two gain from this family partnership? They looked at each other. It was obvious they hadn't had time to coordinate an answer to that question. Well, Robert cleared his throat. We would obviously have to receive compensation for our time and professional expertise. Maybe a small percentage of the profits. What percentage would you consider fair? Nothing outrageous, Jessica intervened quickly. Maybe 20% of the annual returns. 20% of $10,000 a month. They wanted over $20,000 a year to manage my money. It's a very interesting proposal, I said, remaining calm. Let me think about it. Perfect, Jessica clapped. In the meantime, we could start making some basic changes to the house. You know, to make it more comfortable for a woman of your financial standing. And there it was. They hadn't even waited for my answer before they started planning how to spend my money. That night, after they had gone to bed, I sat in Edward's study with a glass of red wine I had saved for a special occasion. I felt his presence in that room, among his books and his photographs, and for the first time since his death, I laughed genuinely. Edward had known exactly what would happen. He had predicted every move, every reaction, every excuse, and he had given me the tools to face it. The next day, while Robert was at work and Jessica was out getting decorating ideas for the new phase of the house, I did something I hadn't done in years. I went to a beautiful place alone just because I wanted to. I took a cab to Millennium Park and walked along the winding paths. I bought flowers from a street vendor, ate a hot pretzel, and sat on a bench by the Cloudgate sculpture, watching people live their lives without asking anyone for permission. For the first time in decades, no one knew where I was. No one had asked me to prepare food, to clean something, to solve a problem. I wasn't Robert's mother, or Jessica's mother-in-law, or the grandmother who had failed to keep her grandchildren's attention. I was simply Carol, a 68-year-old woman with the financial power to do exactly as she pleased. I bought a new dress at an elegant boutique on Michigan Avenue. It was emerald green, made of a soft fabric I had never allowed myself, with a cut that flattered my figure. The saleswoman, a kind young woman, also helped me pick out shoes and a matching handbag. "You look beautiful, ma'am," she told me sincerely. "That color is perfect on you." When I saw myself in the mirror, I didn't recognize the woman looking back at me. She wasn't the old lady who apologized for existing, who dressed in comfortable but frumpy clothes, who had accepted becoming invisible. She was an elegant, self-assured woman who had every right in the world to take up space and be seen. I returned home at 6 in the evening, carrying my shopping bags. Robert and Jessica were in the living room, clearly waiting for me with some anxiety. "Mom, where were you?" Robert stood up immediately. "Jessica got home at 3 and you weren't here. We were worried." "I was shopping," I replied simply, showing my bags. Jessica's eyes lit up as she saw the bags from expensive stores. "Oh, that's wonderful, Carol. It's about time you treated yourself. Can I see what you bought?" There was something in her tone that deeply annoyed me. It was as if my right to buy nice things for myself was a surprising novelty, something that required her approval or celebration. "It's clothes for me, Jessica. Clothes I bought with my money to wear whenever I feel like it." Robert exchanged a worried glance with his wife. My tone had been firmer than usual. "Of course, Mom. It's just, maybe we should start planning a budget. You know, to make sure that inheritance lasts for many years." "A budget?" I sat in my favorite armchair, the one Jessica had wanted to replace with something more modern. "Robert, with my monthly income, I could buy a new dress every single day for the rest of my life and still have money left over." Jessica laughed nervously. Well, yes, but you also have to think about smart investments, about growing the portfolio. For whom, Jessica? For whom do I need to grow the portfolio? The question left her speechless. Robert tried to rescue her. Well, Mom, for the grandkids, for future generations of the family, the grandkids who don't visit me, who don't call me, who don't even know when my birthday is. I said calmly. Those grandkids? An uncomfortable silence filled the room. It was the first time I had directly mentioned Ethan and Madison's neglect. Mom, the kids are at a difficult age. Robert, I interrupted him, your children are 15 and 12. They aren't toddlers. They are old enough to call their grandmother once in a while, or to remember I exist when they don't need something from me. Jessica straightened in her seat. Carol, I think you're being a little unfair to the children. Unfair? I laughed. Jessica, the last time Ethan came to this house, the only things he said to me in 4 hours were hi and what's the Wi-Fi password? Madison didn't even speak to me. She was glued to her phone the entire visit. It's this generation, Carol. All teenagers are like that. No, Jessica. Teenagers whose parents teach them respect and gratitude are not like that. But you have taught them that Grandma's house is boring, that her ways are old-fashioned, that she is irrelevant to their modern lives. Robert stood up abruptly. That's not true, Mom. We would never... Never what, Robert? Never made dismissive comments about my age, my cooking, my clothes, my way of cleaning the house? Never planned to kick me out of my home without consulting me? The air grew tense. For the first time in years, I had laid out all the things that had hurt me, all the humiliations I had endured in silence. Mom, I think you're misinterpreting. I am not misinterpreting anything, son. My voice cut the air like a whip. And I think it's time we all understood something very clearly. My money is mine. My house is mine. My life is mine. And I am going to start living it as I see fit. The following days were a silent war. Robert and Jessica walked around the house as if it were filled with bombs that could detonate at any moment. They watched me when I was on the phone, tried to overhear my conversations, and analyzed every gesture I made as if it were a clue to my future plans. Jessica had completely changed her strategy. She no longer spoke to me with condescension, but with a sickeningly sweet tone that was even more unbearable. She brought me coffee without being asked, offered to help with things I didn't need help with, and constantly commented on how great I looked in my new clothes. Carol, you look radiant, she told me one morning at breakfast. That green dress you bought is beautiful on you. We should go shopping together more often. Robert, meanwhile, had started visiting me in the afternoons with the excuse of just chatting, but he always ended up steering the conversation toward financial topics. Mom, I've been thinking about what you told me about Dad's investments. Have you been to the bank to review all the documents? Because it would be important to make sure everything is in order. Everything is perfectly in order, Robert. Yes, but maybe it would be good if I went with you next time. These things can be very complicated, and we don't want someone trying to take advantage of you. The irony was astounding. The only people who had tried to take advantage of me were sitting in my living room, feigning concern for my financial well-being. On Thursday night, as we were having dinner, Jessica decided to make her boldest move yet. Carol, Robert, and I were talking, and we think it would be wonderful to organize a family gathering this weekend. We could invite Ethan and Madison, maybe ask them to sleep over like they used to, and the whole family could be together to talk about the future. What kind of future? I asked. Well, now that we know about Grandpa Edward's inheritance, I think it would be nice for everyone to be involved in the important decisions. The grandchildren are part of this family, too. Robert nodded enthusiastically. That's an excellent idea, honey. Mom, it's been a long time since you've had a real family gathering, and I'm sure Ethan and Madison would be thrilled to spend time with you. Thrilled. The grandchildren who hadn't called me once since Edward's death would suddenly be thrilled to spend time with me now that they knew there was money involved. All right, I said calmly. Organize your family meeting. Jessica smiled triumphantly. Perfect. I'll make a special dinner. We could order from that Japanese restaurant the kids love. On Saturday, they all arrived on time. Ethan, now 15, had grown considerably since I last saw him. He was as tall as his father, and had that teenage attitude of someone who thinks the world revolves around them. Madison, 12, had become a miniature version of Jessica, with the same calculating expression and air of superiority. "Hi, Grandma." They greeted me mechanically, without even looking up from their phones. During dinner, Robert and Jessica maintained an artificial conversation about family matters, but I could feel the tension in the air. Everyone was waiting for the right moment to address the real topic of the meeting. After dessert, Jessica finally made the first move. "Well, family, Robert and I wanted to get everyone together because we have some very exciting news to share." Ethan and Madison looked up for the first time all evening. "Grandma Carol just found out that Grandpa Edward left her a very significant inheritance," Jessica continued, "and we think it's wonderful that the whole family can benefit from this blessing." "How much money?" Ethan asked directly, without any preamble or courtesy. Robert cleared his throat. "Ethan, it's not polite to ask that so directly." "Why not?" Madison joined in. "If we're going to talk about money, let's just be clear. How much is there?" I watched my grandchildren. There it was, the real education they had received at home. Money before respect. Benefits before affection. $2.5 million, I answered calmly. Ethan's eyes lit up like neon signs. "Seriously? That's so much money. What are you going to do with all of it, Grandma?" "I'm not sure yet, Ethan." Madison straightened in her chair, suddenly interested in the conversation. "Grandma, did you know my laptop broke last week? It's for school, super important. And the new MacBook Pros cost like $2,000, but with $2.5 million... Madison," Jessica interrupted her with a nervous smile. "This isn't the time to ask for things." "Why not?" the girl retorted. "Ethan needs money for his student exchange trip to Canada next year. That's like $10,000. And I need braces, which are also super expensive." Ethan perked up. "That's right. And Grandma, I was also thinking that with that kind of money you could buy us a car when we turn 18. Nothing crazy, just something decent like a BMW or an Audi." Robert tried to control the situation. "Kids, your grandfather's inheritance isn't for frivolous spending." "Frivolous?" Ethan frowned. "Dad, you yourself said education was the most important thing. The exchange trip to Canada is education. And a car is a necessity, not a luxury." Jessica looked at me with that manipulative smile I knew so well. "Carol, what do you think?" "The kids make some very good points." I observed them all, Robert nodding as if his children's demands were completely reasonable, Jessica mentally calculating how much money they could extract from me in this first round. Ethan and Madison looking at me for the first time in months, but not with affection, but with the same expression they would have looking at a vending machine full of candy. "Do you know what I find most interesting about all of this?" I said finally. "It's the first time in years that all of you are genuinely excited to be here with me." An awkward silence filled the dining room. "Do you know when the last time Ethan called me on the phone was?" I continued. 8 months ago, when he needed to borrow money for a pair of designer sneakers that cost $200. Ethan shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "And Madison?" I looked at my granddaughter. "The last time she spoke to me was to ask if I could give her money to go to the movies with her friends. When I said yes, but that I'd also like to spend time with her, she told me she was too busy with school." Madison avoided my gaze. "But now," I continued, feeling a strange calm, "now that you know I have $2.5 million, suddenly I'm interesting. Suddenly I'm worth your time. Suddenly I deserve a special family meeting." Robert tried to interrupt. "Mom, I think you're misinterpreting." "No!" My voice cut the air like a whip. "I will not let you tell me one more time that I am misinterpreting something. For years, I had misinterpreted their disrespect, their humiliations, their indifference. But tonight, I see everything with perfect clarity." I stood up from the table and walked over to the sideboard where I kept the family photos. I picked one in particular, last Christmas, where everyone was forcing a smile while I stood beside them, holding the gifts I had bought with the money I had worked so hard to save. "Do you know what I see when I look at this photo?" I showed them the image. "I see an elderly woman who spent $500 on gifts for a family that didn't value her. Gifts that you opened without enthusiasm, thanked me for without sincerity, and probably forgot about a week later." Jessica stood up as well. "Carol, I think you're being very dramatic." "Dramatic?" I laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. Jessica, for months you have been planning to get me out of my house, have me declared mentally incompetent, and sell my property to finance my imprisonment in a facility. Isn't that dramatic? The grandchildren looked at their parents in surprise. They clearly didn't know about those plans. And you two, I turned to Ethan and Madison, you have spent years treating me like a piece of old furniture in this house. You arrive, you eat, you ask for money, and you leave. You never ask how I am, you never tell me about your lives, you never act as if you care that I exist. Madison started to cry, but I wasn't sure if it was sincere or calculated. Grandma, we do love you. You love me? I interrupted. Madison, do you know when my birthday is? Silence. Ethan, do you know what my favorite food is? What my favorite color is? What TV shows I watch? How I've been feeling since your grandfather died? More silence. You know nothing about me because you've never cared enough to ask. You only care about me when you need something. Robert approached me with that expression he had used my whole life when he wanted to calm me down after hurting my feelings. Mom, I understand you're hurt, but we're family. Families go through tough times, but they always forgive each other and move on. Move on? I looked him straight in the eye. Robert, do you remember when you were a little boy and you told me that when you grew up, you would take care of me just like I had taken care of you? His expression softened. Yes, Mom. Of course I remember. Do you remember all the nights I stayed up with you when you had a fever? All the extra jobs I worked to pay for your education? All the times your father and I denied ourselves things to give you the best? Yes. His voice was barely a whisper. Then tell me, son, is this taking care of me? Is planning to kick me out of my home taking care of me? Is threatening me with legal proceedings taking care of me? Is allowing your wife to speak to me as if I were a hired maid taking care of me? Tears began to roll down Robert's cheeks. For the first time in years, he seemed to truly see what he had allowed to happen. Mom, we didn't mean to. No, I cut him off. You are not going to use the words, didn't mean to. This wasn't an accident. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a series of conscious decisions. You decided I was a burden. You decided my well-being was less important than your comfort. You decided my feelings didn't matter. I walked to the window and looked out at the garden Edward had planted, now illuminated by the lights we had installed together so we could enjoy it at night as well. For 40 years, I built my life around this family. I put your needs before mine, your dreams before mine, your happiness before mine. And now that I finally have the financial freedom to live as I deserve, your first reaction is to calculate how you can benefit from it? I turned to face them all. Well then, it's time for you to learn something very important. My money, my house, and my life are no longer available for your plans. The next day, Robert and Jessica were gone before I woke up. They left a note on the kitchen counter. We're going to stay at Jessica's parents' for a few days to give you some space and think things over. The grandchildren had left the night before, after the confrontation, without so much as a goodbye. For the first time in 3 years, my house was completely empty, completely mine. I walked barefoot through each room, feeling the hardwood floors under my feet as if for the first time. The living room without the constant tension of Jessica criticizing the decor. The kitchen, without her comments on my outdated methods. The dining room, without the forced conversations where we pretended to be a happy family. The silence wasn't empty. It was full of possibilities, of freedom, of decisions I could make just for myself. That morning, I dialed Mr. Davies' number. Mr. Davies, this is Carol Thompson. Could I come see you this afternoon? There are a few things I'd like to do with my estate. Of course, Mrs. Thompson. I'll expect you at 3. In his office, with a cup of real coffee and a beautiful view of the city, I explained what I had discovered about my family and what I wanted to do about it. I understand perfectly, Mrs. Thompson, Mr. Davies said with a sympathetic smile. Mr. Thompson warned me this might happen. In fact, he asked me to offer you some specific options if you should ever need them. He opened a different file, one marked, Contingency Plans, Carol. Your husband thought of several possibilities. First, we can establish an irrevocable trust that ensures no one else can access your funds without your explicit authorization. Second, we can change the deed to your house to include protective clauses. And third, Mr. Thompson set aside specific funds for something he called the Dignity Project. The Dignity Project? He wanted you to have the option to create something meaningful if you decided your family didn't deserve your generosity. There is $250,000 specifically earmarked for a personal project that would give you purpose and satisfaction. Edward had thought of everything, even my need to feel useful, to have a purpose beyond being the family's source of money. What do I have to do? Just decide how you want to live the rest of your life, Mrs. Thompson, and we'll take care of making sure no one can stop you. That afternoon, walking through the streets of Lincoln Park after signing all the legal protection documents, I stopped in front of a small cafe I had always wanted to visit but never made the time for. It was called the Looking Glass Cafe and had outdoor tables under leafy trees. I ordered a cappuccino, something Jessica would have considered pretentious for a woman my age, and a slice of delicious-looking chocolate cake. As I savored it slowly, I watched the people pass by. Real families, where children listened to their parents with attention, where grandparents were included in conversations, where affection was genuine and not calculated. A woman my age, elegantly dressed, sat at the table next to mine. After a few minutes, we struck up a conversation. "Forgive my curiosity," she said, "but you look radiant. There's something in your expression that seems very familiar." Familiar? Yes. It's the expression of someone who has just made a very important decision about her life. I laughed. This stranger had read me perfectly. "You're right. I've just decided that I'm going to start living for myself." "Excellent," she clapped softly. "I made that decision 5 years ago when I turned 70. Better late than never, right?" She introduced herself as Eleanor Vance, a retired architect who had decided to travel the country after her adult children made it clear her role as a mother was over. "And what have you discovered in these 5 years?" I asked her. "That life after 60 can be the best time of all, if you have the courage to live it on your own terms." We talked for 2 hours. Eleanor told me about the places she'd visited, the art classes she'd taken, the friends she'd made on her travels. She told me about a community of older women who had met under different circumstances, but now traveled together, supported each other, and had created a sort of chosen family. "Do you know what's most liberating?" she said before we parted ways. "Realizing that you don't owe your happiness to anyone else, not even your family." That night, in my quiet house, I sat in Edward's study and wrote a letter, not to send to anyone, but for myself. A letter from the woman I had been to the woman I was going to be. "Dear future Carol, today you started a new life. Today you stopped apologizing for existing, for having desires, for wanting genuine respect and affection. Today you learned that real love isn't bought, begged for, or negotiated. It either exists or it doesn't, and you deserve for it to exist. Edward gave you the tools. Now use them to build something beautiful." The next day, I began my Dignity Project. After much thought, I knew exactly what I wanted to do. There was a plot of land for sale in Hyde Park, near where Edward and I used to walk on Sundays. It was perfect for what I had in mind: a community center for older women, not a nursing home, not an assisted living facility, but a place where women of my generation could gather, learn new things, share experiences, and support one another. Eleanor House, I decided to name it in honor of my new friend, would be a space with art workshops, computer classes, a community garden, a library, and above all, a place where older women were valued for their wisdom, not ignored for their age. I hired the best architect money could buy, not because he was expensive, but because he was the best. For the first time in my life, I allowed myself to have the best. The following months were the most exciting I had lived in decades. Supervising the construction, choosing the colors, designing the spaces, interviewing staff. Every decision was mine. Every dollar spent was on something I considered valuable. During this time, Robert called me several times. At first, his calls were tentative, filled with guilt. "Mom, how are you? We've been thinking a lot about what happened." "I'm very well, Robert. Better than I've been in years. Could we talk? Maybe have dinner together like before." "Like before when, Robert?" Like before when Jessica humiliated me during meals? Like before when you were planning to kick me out of my house? There was a long silence. Mom, I know we made mistakes. They weren't mistakes, son. They were decisions. And decisions have consequences. Does that mean you'll never forgive me? Robert, this isn't about forgiveness. It's about respect. When you're ready to treat me with the respect I deserve, when Jessica can address me like a dignified human being, when your children can see me as more than just a money machine, then we can talk. And in the meantime? In the meantime, I'm going to live my life, and it's going to be a beautiful life. 3 months after our family confrontation, Eleanor House opened its doors. The inauguration was a small but meaningful celebration. Eleanor, my architect friend, brought several women from her travel group. Mr. Davies came with his wife. The neighborhood residents brought flowers and homemade food. For the first time in years, I was the center of attention for something positive I had created, not for being someone's victim. During the ceremony, a woman in her 70s approached me with tears in her eyes. Mrs. Thompson, you don't know what this place means to me. Ever since my husband died, my children treat me like I'm invisible. Here, I feel alive again. That night, as I walked through the empty spaces of Eleanor House, I imagined all the lives that would be touched in these rooms, all the dreams that would be fulfilled, all the dignity that would be restored. Edward had been right. Financial freedom wasn't just about money. It was about the power to choose who you wanted to be and how you wanted to spend your remaining days. My phone rang. It was Robert. Mom, I saw the article in the local paper about your community center. I'm really proud of you. Thank you, Robert. Do you think maybe I could see it sometime? For the first time in months, I heard something different in his voice. Respect. Genuine admiration. Not the condescension of a son talking to an aging mother who needed to be tolerated, but the acknowledgement of a grown man seeing a woman who had accomplished something important. When you're ready to come without Jessica, without the kids, without a hidden agenda, just you wanting to see what I've built, then, yes. And what if I just bring sincerity? Sincerity is always welcome, son. After I hung up, I went out into my garden. The flowers Edward had planted were more beautiful than ever, as if they too had bloomed with my new freedom. For the first time since his death, I spoke to Edward without tears. Thank you, my love. Not just for the money. Thank you for believing I deserved a beautiful life. Thank you for giving me the tools to build it. And thank you for teaching me that it's never too late to start over. 6 months after opening Eleanor House, my life had taken a shape I never imagined possible. Every morning, I woke not with the anxiety of pleasing others, but with the excitement of discovering what new experiences awaited me. This particular morning was special. It was my 69th birthday, and for the first time in years, I had plans that I had chosen myself. Eleanor and the women from Eleanor House had organized a celebration, but before that, I had an important appointment. Robert had called the week before. Mom, could I visit you? Just me. There are a lot of things I need to say. Now he was sitting in my living room, but not on the same sofa where Jessica used to plot my fate. I had completely redesigned the decor after they left. More vibrant colors, more comfortable furniture, photographs of my recent travels with Eleanor and the women from Eleanor House. The house now reflected who I was, not who others expected me to be. Robert observed everything with an expression I couldn't quite decipher. The house looks beautiful, Mom. It looks alive. Thank you. Would you like some coffee? I made it with my new espresso machine. He smiled sadly. The same one Jessica said you needed, but we never bought for you. The very same. Although I discovered I still prefer the coffee I always made. Except now I make it because I like it, not because it's the only thing I know how to do. I served him coffee in new cups. Fine china I had bought on a trip to Santa Fe with Eleanor. For 6 months, Robert and I had had cautious phone conversations. But this was the first time he had come to my house since the confrontation. Mom, I came to apologize. Not the quick apology kids give when they're scolded, but the real apology of a grown man who realized he deeply hurt the person he loved most. I'm listening, I said simply. For the past few months, I've been going to therapy. At first, it was because Jessica and I were having serious problems after what happened here. She couldn't understand why I had changed my attitude toward you, why I no longer supported her plans, why I suddenly saw her differently. Robert fell silent for a moment. Do you know what hurt me the most about that whole confrontation we had? It wasn't you telling me I'd been a bad son. It was realizing you were right. Robert. No, Mom, let me finish. Because I need to say this. I realized that somewhere in the last few years, I stopped seeing you as my mother and started seeing you as a problem to be solved. I stopped wondering if you were happy and only wondered if you were functional for our plans. His eyes filled with tears. Remember when I was a kid and you worked 2 jobs to pay for my swimming lessons? I'd come home tired from practice, and you'd always have dinner ready. Always have time to ask about my day. Always have energy for me even though you'd worked 12 hours. Of course I remember. And when I graduated as an engineer, I promised that one day I would take care of you the same way, that I would make sure you never wanted for anything, that you were happy, that you felt loved. Robert covered his face with his hands. Instead, I allowed my wife to humiliate you in your own home. I planned to kick you out of your home. I treated you like a financial burden. I turned my children into people who only saw you as useful when they needed money. And what are you going to do about it? I asked softly. Jessica and I are getting a divorce. It didn't surprise me as much as I thought it would. It's not just because of what happened with you, although that was the catalyst. In therapy, I realized I had allowed someone who didn't respect you to control how I treated my own mother. And if I was capable of betraying you, the person who has loved me most in my life, what kind of man was I really? And the kids? The kids will be living with me part of the time, and the first thing they are going to learn is to respect you properly. Not because you have money, but because you are their grandmother, and you deserve their genuine love. Robert stood up and walked to the window overlooking the garden. Mom, I know I have no right to ask you for anything after everything that's happened, but I'd like to ask for a chance to be the son I promised to be when I was 8 years old. What does that mean specifically, Robert? It means I want to get to know the woman you've become. I want to know about Eleanor House, about your new friends, about the places you've visited. I want you to tell me about your plans, your dreams, the things that excite you. He turned back to me. And it means I want to take care of you, but not like you're a helpless old woman. I want to take care of you the way you care for someone you love, by respecting their decisions, supporting their dreams, and celebrating their accomplishments. For the first time in months, I felt like I was talking to the Robert I had raised, not the man who had let others define his priorities. And what if I tell you I don't need you to take care of me anymore? That I've learned to take perfect care of myself? Then I'll tell you that I'm proud of you for finding that strength, and I'll ask you to let me join you in this new chapter, not as your caregiver, but as your son who admires you. That afternoon, Robert came with me to Eleanor House for my birthday celebration. The women had prepared a beautiful party for me in the community garden we had built. There was music, delicious food prepared by the participants themselves, and an energy of genuine joy I hadn't felt at a family celebration in years. Eleanor gave Robert a full tour of the center, explaining every program, every workshop, every space we had designed to make older women feel valued and active. Your mother is extraordinary, Eleanor told him. She has created something that is changing lives. We have a waiting list of over 50 women who want to join our programs. Robert looked at me with an expression I hadn't seen in his eyes in years. Genuine respect. During the celebration, one of the participants from Eleanor House, a woman named Mary, stood up to give a toast. I want to say something about Carol. When I came here 3 months ago, I came from a situation similar to many of yours. My family saw me as a burden, as someone who had served her purpose and was now just an expense and a worry. Several women nodded, recognizing their own stories. Carol didn't just give me a place to feel useful again. She gave me back something I thought I had lost forever, my dignity. Here, I learned to use a computer. I started watercolor painting. I made true friends. But most of all, I remembered that my life hadn't ended when I turned 70. The toast continued, with each woman sharing something Eleanor House had meant to her. Stories of rediscovery, of new passions, of family relationships that had improved when they regained their self-esteem. To Carol, they all shouted in unison, for teaching us that it's never too late to bloom. That night, after everyone had left, Robert and I sat in my garden, having a glass of wine under the stars. "Mom, I have a question I've wanted to ask you for months." "Go ahead." "Will you ever completely forgive me?" I thought about it for a long moment. "Robert, forgiveness isn't something you give once and it's done. It's something that's built day by day with consistent actions that show the person has truly changed. And how will I know if I've achieved it? You'll know when you no longer have to ask. When treating your mother with respect is so natural that it doesn't require a conscious effort." 2 years later, as I wrote in my journal on the terrace of Eleanor House, I reflected on the journey I had taken since that terrible morning I heard Edward's letter. Robert had kept his word. He had become the son he promised to be as a child, not because he pitied me or hoped to inherit my money, but because he had rediscovered the genuine love we had before other influences contaminated it. Ethan and Madison had started visiting me regularly, but under new rules set by Robert. No asking for money, no arriving empty-handed expecting to be served. They came wanting to spend time with me, helped me in the garden, and asked about my projects. Ethan had even started volunteering at Eleanor House during his vacations. Jessica had completely disappeared from our lives after the divorce. Occasionally, I'd hear reports that she was doing well, that she'd found another man who met her financial expectations. But she was no longer relevant to my story. Eleanor House had grown to 3 centers in different parts of the city. We had helped more than 200 women rediscover their value, their talents, their will to live. The project had given my life so much purpose that I could no longer imagine my days without it. The $2.5 million Edward had left me hadn't just given me financial freedom. It had taught me something fundamental. My value as a person did not depend on how useful I was to others, but on my own ability to create beauty, purpose, and dignity in the world. Every morning, I woke up grateful, not just for Edward's material inheritance, but for the emotional one, the conviction that I deserved to be loved, respected, and valued for who I was, not for what I could give. The story that had begun with betrayal, humiliation, and abandonment had transformed into a story of rebirth, purpose, and authentic love. And as I watched the women of Eleanor House laughing in the garden, sharing stories, learning new things, I knew Edward would be proud, not just of the money he had invested wisely, but of the woman I had become when I finally had the courage to choose my own life. Have you lived through or do you know someone who has experienced something similar, where a family takes advantage of an older person's generosity until they can't anymore? Tell me your experience in the comments. If this story touched your heart, please give it a like and subscribe to the channel so this message can reach someone who needs to hear it. Sometimes, we all need a reminder that it's never too late to choose our own happiness.